Well, hello, guys. Um, Gonna get started in a second here. I don't know what happened to my music. My music will not work tonight. Strange. There it goes. All right. Well, that finally worked. But let's get started. I wanted to say hello to everybody first. As usual, we will say hello before we light the candles and set the stage for the story. But hello, Thindu, my brother. Steven, Sven Larson, haven't seen you in a while. Great to see you. Adam Gravorcier, Stiggs, and Mike F. The loyal folks are here. The loyal followers are here. That's great. Anyway, it's a bit warm this evening, which is unusual for this time of year, but it is New Jersey, and that's the way the weather goes in New Jersey. It could be up and down at the blink of an eye. But tonight's story is about a headless ghost. Now, we're all familiar with the headless horseman. This guy's not a horseman. This guy is on foot. And there's several stories involved here. And they all take place in the certain area of Pennsylvania. And that Pennsylvania, it's a pretty big state. And this area is right dead center, but north, the northern part. And it's Clinton County. And the area in question is Kettle Creek. And they call this the Headless Frenchman of Kettle Creek. So, a little background before we get started. I love to do historical background, because most of these stories are always historical. But they are, as you know, the French, when they settled North America, were different than the English. The English were here to colonize. The English were here to set up civilization. The French were that wasn't necessarily their goal. Their goal was to come and trade and get furs and send them back to Europe. So a lot of the frontier was not developed by the French. The French had these mountain men that would go out and trade with the Indians and also trap a lot of furs and bring that stuff back. And in order to support this industry, they set up these forts. They built these forts along North America, Canada, and North America. And this story goes directly to one of those forts, which was in this area in Kettle Creek, Pennsylvania. And we don't usually think of the French being that far south, but they were before the English got there. So that's the area in question. And hello, Emmanuel Spataro. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining. So let's talk about this a little bit more in terms of what is this who is this headless Frenchman? What's going on here? Well, there's several theories about who the Frenchman actually is, but let's start off with there's basically three different stories of a headless person, a ghost of a headless ghost that stalks or haunts this Kettle Creek area. Now, I'm going to tell you all three of them. Hi, Gina. Good to see you. I'm going to tell you all three of these stories. And then I'm going to also tell you, the origin stories. And then I'm also going to tell you, like, some firsthand sighting, a specific firsthand sighting of the ghost that spurred a lot of this. That really spurred and brought on the legend. And the legend, like, spread a lot because of this sighting. But let's start off with the first headless ghost is believed to be the ghost of Lieutenant Gaston Bouchon. Now, Lieutenant Gaston Bouchon. Now, he was a lieutenant in the French army, and he was responsible for one of these forts that they set up. They set up a chain of forts to support the fur trademen, trappers. They go out and they capture animals and they skin them and they send the furs back. So, Lieutenant Gaston Bouchon is called the Spook of Spook Hill, is his nickname, because the area in question that he haunts is called Spook Hill. Why it's called that, I really don't know, but that's what it's called. So this all goes back to the foundation of a fort there that was discovered in the 1920s. And it was there's some dispute as to which fort it was, whether it was Fort Horn, which is a known fort, or it was this Fort Numero Sept. There's two different forts, but they're not sure which one it was. But it's part of that chain. And the story goes that one night, a trapper by the name of Lebrun, Lebrun, arrived at the fort with 4 additional trappers with him. They arrived at this area in north of Kettle Creek, where this foundation is located. And they were seeking shelter in the fort because what had happened was one of the trappers by the name of Louis Lafitte had recently killed a noted medicine man and by the name of Two Pines. That was this American Indian's name. And Louis Lafitte had killed him. And I don't know the story or the backstory as to what happened, as to why he did this, but regardless, he did. And him and his co-trappers were fleeing because the Indians were in hot pursuit of them. So Lieutenant Gaston Bouchon grants them sanctuary, allows them to stay at the fort, which turns out to be his undoing in the end. Because not too long after that, Chief Susquois shows up with a party of braves, a pretty large party of braves, about 50 of them, and begins to besiege the fort because they want to get Lafitte. They want him. He killed their medicine man, and they're going to get him one way or the other. So they immediately attack the fort, and Lafitte is actually killed instantly. Interestingly enough, he's killed. Interestingly, the guy that caused all of this is killed. But the Indians don't go away. And in fact, what happens is they continue their assault on the fort. And the next morning, Lafitte is killed outside the fort. But the next morning, a bunch of Frenchmen go out to try to bury Lafitte. And as they're burying him, they get attacked. And in that skirmish there, Bouchon shoots and kills one of the Indians. So the Indians are not going away because that precedes an additional attack by the Indians. Now, in this one, it's a pretty intense battle, and in fact, 39 Indians are killed in front of the fort there because they couldn't reach the gates. But for some reason, Bouchon decides that the best course of action is, even though they did pretty well in that battle, the best course of action is to abandon the fort and head south. So the next morning, Lebrun, who was one of the leader of the trappers, and a few soldiers that are left in the fort, proceed quickly to head towards the river. Now, the river is the Susquehanna River. That's what Kettle Creek is. It's a branch of the Susquehanna River. And I'll show you that in a minute. I'm going to show you, once I finish this part of the story, I'll show you some pictures of the area. And LeBron is instantly killed as he's trying to fill up a canoe. You know, they're trying to pack the canoes and kill. He's instantly killed. The Bouchon tells the trappers to continue on, go, and he will stay back with a couple of men and do a fighting retreat so they could escape. So they proceed on the river, and in the course of this, Bouchon gets into hand-to-hand combat with several of the natives. And in the course of this, one of the natives grabs his sword, takes it out, and swipes at his neck and ends up chopping his head off. And they say that the French trappers, as they were going downriver, you know, they themselves were safe. They saw a cheap Sasquatch taking the head and hurling it into the river in triumph. And it said that individual, Gaston Bouchon, is one of the ghosts in this area. Now, it's interesting because it's said that his ghost appears at a specific time of day, 12 noon every day on the bank of that river. And some people said they've seen him. Others have gone there specifically to look for him and have not necessarily seen them. But it's interesting to have a ghost appear in the middle of the day like that, 12 noon. So I always thought that was interesting. Hey, Todd Father, thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. So let me go, and before I go on to the next story here, so that's the one story. The one story is Lieutenant Gaston Bouchon. Is he the headless ghost of Kettle Creek? I don't know, because there's more to tell, but we're going to find out. But right now, I'm going to share with you, just to get a little bit of perspective here, the area in which we're talking about. So here is, let's say, here we go. This is the area of Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but it shows you the area in question. Down at the right-hand corner is Philadelphia. The left-hand corner is Pittsburgh. It's right up, kind of like a triangle between the two. That's the area in question. It's the northern part of Pennsylvania in the center. And that's the area we're thinking about or talking about. And here's a picture of the area. The general area, hold on here, which I think is, I've never been there, but it looks quite beautiful. It's all wooded, mountainous, still wooded. There's some like farmland over here, but it's, for the most part, it's still wooded area. So it's a park now. It is I don't know if it's a state park or a national park, but it's Kettle Creek Park, and it looks like a beautiful area. So, that's the area that's inhabited by this ghost. Hey, Armed Distance, good to see you. All right, now, is it Gaston? I don't know. We'll see. Now, the second story happens north of that area, a little bit north of that area. And it has to do with a logging area, Wait a minute. What am I doing? I didn't light my candles. How can we do this without the candles lit? Sorry about that. We need to have our candles lit. There we go. Now, this particular story takes place around the year 1900, and it was a big logging area at the time, and there was a railroad that went through there that was used to take logs, in other words, trees that were cut down from the area in question, and take them to the mill for processing and what have you. Well, the story goes that on one night, a random Swede who had been working on the logging area was walking along the tracks of the railroad. And as he's walking from the mill back to the camp area, which is where most of the loggers stayed. That's where the loggers stayed. It's where they're going to cut down the trees, etc. So he's walking back, and he suddenly notices that someone is walking alongside of him. Now, the Swede automatically assumed that this was just another one of his coworkers, another one of his loggers that had caught up with him. So he begins to try to have a conversation with this person. It was pretty dark. He couldn't really see very well at all. But he noticed that the person was kind of short. And so he tries to speak up a conversation, and the only thing he hears back is a moan, like a very low moan. Ooh, like just no. And at this, so this is a bit troubling to the Swede, and the Swede stops, turns, and looks, and suddenly realizes that the figure he's talking to has no head at all. And at this point, the Swede panics and runs like the devil out of there as fast as he can towards the towards the camp, towards the camp, and on the way back, so he gets to the camp and he tells them about this experience. Well, most of them don't believe it. They think he had too much to drink wherever he was on his way back. So it just so happens that later that night there was a train was taking a load back from the camp to the mill again, and that train is going along the tracks, going backtracking as they did normally, the way the Swede walked to the camp, and because and on these trains there, of course, there's a light that shines out, and as they're coming to the same area where the Swede had this encounter, the engineer as well as the fireman. Now, the fireman used to be the guy that puts the coal into the train to keep the engine going. The engineer is the guy that steers the engineer, keeps it going, and then it makes the engine run. And then the fireman is the man that pours in the coal or the wood, if it's a steam engine or if it's a coal engine, whatever. So they're going along, and both suddenly see on the tracks a figure waving its hands like this, waving its hands. And as they get closer and closer, they notice that the figure has no head. Well, the engineer yanks on the brakes in hopes of stopping the train, and the screeching of the train uh, suddenly scared this creature or whatever to the point that it jumped off of the tracks and over the side into the woods and vanished, and could never be seen again. So this is who this headless spirit was, or ghost, we don't know. The train didn't didn't hit it because it jumped out of the way, but they swore that there was no head on this figure. And it was similar in the similar area that the Swede had encountered this. So that's story number 2. We have Gaston, which happened back in the day, 1600s. And then we have this logging story, all in around 20 miles apart area. And that brings us to the main story. The main story around the Frenchman, the headless Frenchman of Kettle Creek, starts. And there's 2 versions of the main story, which is interesting. The first story is that around 1663, 1633, something like that, an original Frenchman that came over with de Charlemagne came over with him, and Lake Champlain. Champlain was named after that explorer, and came along with him, and this individual ended up going with a group of Seneca Indians, and they took him south from New York down into Pennsylvania. And on the course of this, these Indians showed him a mine that they had, a silver mine that they were mining, and that there were actually baseball side silver in there that they were mining. And what they would ultimately do is mine it for and refine it for the Iroquois Confederacy, which was a huge, powerful Indian confederacy in the Northeast. The Iroquois Indians were very advanced and very powerful, and they did a lot of trading, and they were mining this silver for the purpose of trading with the English and the French, and trading for firearms. That was the big thing. They needed firearms for hunting, for defense, all that stuff. And they knew that it would give them the advantage over other Indian tribes if they could have all this, if they have had firearms. So the story goes that when the Indians, they show him this mine and then they continue south, he sneaks away from the party and backtracks to the mine in hopes of stealing as much as he can from the silver mine. Well, unfortunately for him, what happens is he's captured. In the process of doing this, he's captured by the Huron, which is the enemy of the Iroquois. The Huron see that he had Seneca things on him, and grab him, torture him, kill him, and behead him. And it's said that it's his ghost that is the main ghost in Kettle Creek. And, him endlessly searching for his head that he lost when he was executed by these Indians. Hey, Paul C., good to see you, my friend. Nice to see you. Edwin, how are you, my friend? Good to see you. So that's the main story, and you hear that a lot. That is the origin story for the Headless Ghost. It happened in the 1630s. He was a Frenchman. He was into this mine, and he went back to steal from this mine, and then he was executed. Now, there's a variation of that story where it was that he was with a bunch of trappers, and what happened is the trappers found a mine on their own, found ore, and started to dig a mine on their own. And in the process, they were attacked by an Indian tribe and beheaded. So it's a little bit of a variation there, two different stories. But you get the gist of it. That's basically the gist of it, that it's a French explorer that had come to the New World and got into trouble with the Indians and ended up getting killed. Now, whether it's Gaston Bouchon, or if it's this other person who is really nameless, I guess. but there's some speculation that he might be, this other person might be a famous French explorer by the name of Etienne Bruel, and I have a picture of him. And some people think that this is his ghost that does this. Let's see, where my picture of him? Where's my picture of this guy? Do I have it? There we go. This is what Etienne Bruel. Etienne Brule looked like. Now, they say that this might be his ghost. Now, he's a real figure. He's a historical figure. He was a French explorer. Now, history tells us, though, that he did not die in this region. No, the history tells us that he died north, killed by the Huron Indians, because they thought he was a traitor and that he was working with the Iroquois, against them. So, because traditionally the French were aligned with the Huron, the Iroquois were aligned with the British. That's usually how it broke down in the various alliances of the day, in the pre-1700s, the pre-1750s back, leading up to the French and Indian War, which, we saw those divisions. We saw the French and the Huron on one side, and we saw the British and the Iroquois on the other. So this is our guy. People think that's him, but however, history tells us that he was killed far north in Canada by the Huron, and that he was dismembered, beheaded, and in fact, they actually ate part of him. So that's a pretty gruesome way to die. But, some people think that he was this guy from this story, from the silver mine. So who knows? I'll leave that up to you guys to determine whether you think it's him or not. But the fact is, we know we have several sightings of this headless ghost, and he was a Frenchman in the region. So let's stop sharing this. Let's get back to the screen here. And Osada, good to see you, my friend. All right, so there are basically our three stories: the Gaston Bouchon story, which was the lieutenant, and the fight with the Indians, and he got his head chopped off in the battle, and that the chief threw it into the water, threw it into the. That's number one. Number two is this unknown headless ghost that around the logging community, and then finally, this is the main story, which is right in the midst of Kettle Creek, right at the bridge where Kettle Creek crosses. Kettle Creek is a contributory, a branch, I guess, of the Susquehanna River, and that's the main one. So whether it's the whole story about a French trapper that either tried to steal money from the Indians or just started mining his own silver, and the Indians didn't like it. So one way or the other, he was killed by the Indians and beheaded. Now, this story has been passed on for years and years and years, and it really was a local story. Like, people didn't know about it. It wasn't until 1950 when this story kind of spread out. And the reason it spread out beyond this Clinton County, Pennsylvania, is because of a story that was written in a newspaper. And the newspaper was the Lock Haven Express. And it was the August 12th, 1950 edition, where a story was written about a personal encounter of two people that worked for the paper with this ghost on Kettle Creek, just near the bridge where the story originally came about. And how that came about was these two people, the reporter's name was Peter Stevenson, and the photographer was named Jim Patterson, and they both worked for Lock Haven Express. And being from the area, they had heard the story and also had encounters with an individual by the name of Hiram Cranmer. And he was famous for telling a lot of these local lore stories. So they met with him. They were looking for something to write a story about. They met with Hiram, and Hiram told them this story told them the details about where they could go to find the ghost. So it was on that night, actually a couple of nights before the publication. So it was earlier in August. I don't know the specific date. They decided to go out to that specific location and wait and see if they could find the ghost. Now, this is pretty unique because in 1950 there weren't these ghost people. There weren't these like ghost hunters out there. The paranormal investigator type of thing didn't come about until the 70s. So these guys were probably like the first ghost hunters, I guess you could call them. So they went out to just stalk out the bridge, and they went and sat in their car. They parked their car in a cemetery not far from the bridge where they could see the bridge. Now, the cemetery just happens to be there. It's nothing unusual. It's not like the ghost haunts that cemetery or anything like that. Nothing spooky about the cemetery. Just a regular cemetery. They just happened to sit there because it was in a good location, and it was a landmark for them to go and set up camp, so to speak, for the night. So they begin to, they sit in the car, and they begin to. Time goes on and time goes on, and it's about midnight or so when they suddenly see something. They describe the night as being cold and chilly, and the fact that the wind would whip up, and yet there would still be a mist coming up from the creek. So the wind was not dissipating the mist. The mist would stay there. Even though they could feel the wind blowing, the mist would still be there and pretty thick. And out of this mist, they suddenly saw something start to materialize. And it was the shape of a man about 5 feet tall. And it was glowing with a reddish white glow. And they saw it on the bridge itself. And it began to move. They began to see it move. So they immediately got out of the car and began to chase it. Let's find out what this is. And the thing was moving pretty quickly. It went over the bridge, and it went along the side of the creek on the bank. And they followed it, until such time as I think it was Patterson. Patterson had a metal container in his pocket which contained film, because he's a photographer. He carries all this stuff with him, and something happened where it fell out of his pocket and made a very like clanging noise. It must have hit a rock or something, but it made this echoing noise. And with that, the ghost stopped and basically turned and started coming towards them. Now, their blood just drained at that point. They turned and they utterly ran back to the car in a panic. They ran back to, they didn't want this thing coming that close to them. They wanted to witness it. They wanted to see what it would do, perhaps get a picture of it, what have you, but they didn't want it coming that close to them. And it was coming towards them fast. So they made it back to the car. They got into the car, drove back to a local tavern or town where they had a few drinks to get their senses, get their nerves under control again. And they did this. They did this for about an hour or so, and they decided, well, listen, no one's going to believe our story unless we go back and try it again and try to get a picture. We have to get a picture. No one is going to believe this. So it's about 2 a.m. in the morning when they end up coming back to the same location, and and once again, it's cold. The wind is blowing. The mist is not as prevalent as it once was. It's kind of calmed down a bit, but the wind was blowing enough so much that Patterson's hair was flying around. So he took out a comb. He took out a comb to comb back his hair out of his face, and as he did that, suddenly within 10 feet from them, the ghost materialized, as if it was the sight or the use of the comb that summoned the ghost. Maybe it's the fact that he couldn't use a comb because he had no head. But regardless, what happened is the ghost materializes, and suddenly they see him without the head, and they see his arms stretch out towards them, and he begins to moan and groan and come towards them in what they described as a threatening way. Now, at this point, they were prepared for this. They were prepared. That Patterson had his camera, and Patterson quickly pulled out the camera. And if you recognize those old cameras, they all had those flash bulbs in them where you had to put the bulb in. It was one shot. You click it, and then the bulb would be broken, and you'd have to change it. Well, he quickly lifted his camera, took the shot, and the light from the flash lit up the woods, lit up the area to the point that they were that their vision was completely blurred, and they heard this blood. With that, they heard this blood curdling scream, and as their um, vision comes back, as your vision comes back from the glaring light of the flash, they suddenly see the the ghost fade into mist, completely fade and disappear. Well, at this point, they hightailed it out of there, went back to the paper in the middle of the night with the film in hopes of developing the picture to see this is proof. Well, this is what I'll show you exactly what they ended up having on that camera reel, on that film, that roll of film. This is what they picked up. And this is what was published in the paper on October 12th, 1950, along with the story, which made the Headless Frenchman of Kettle Creek famous beyond the local legend. Now, if you look at this picture, this is very interesting to me, because if you see down here in where the feed area, the boots, like the boots here, these things are very reminiscent of the way explorers or military people would wear during the time period of the 1600s. If you've ever seen those, this is what the boots would look like. So to me, that's very telling that this could be something, this could have some credibility, because look at the boots. Those are the type of boots that someone would wear in the 1600s. So this was the picture that made it famous. And so that's where that's where the story ends. And since that time, many people have gone out in hopes of encountering the ghost, but no one has ever come back and published any type of account where they actually witnessed the headless ghost, the headless Frenchman. But that took place at a place called Hemmerly Fork in the bridge on Route 144, and actually the bridge is in the picture I showed you before. I'll show you the bridge again. I'll show you the picture again so you can see it, know what I'm talking about here. This right here is the bridge. Right here, this is the bridge. I mean, the bridge is more modernized now than it was, and it's a major road now, I guess, than it was in the 50s. But this is 1950. But this is the area in question. This is the branch of the Susquehanna. The Kettle Creek is the area here, and that's where it took place. On this side, this over here somewhere over here is where the cemetery is. Over here on that side, on the right side of the banks. But that's the interesting story, in my opinion, of the headless Frenchman of Kettle Creek. Now, what is it actually Etienne Brûlé, or is it Lieutenant Gaston Bouchon, or is it some third person? Who knows? No one really knows. Everyone has their own little theory here in what's going on here and what the origin of this was, and what poor soul is still there looking for his head out there in the wilds of Pennsylvania, which is still a rural area. Still, now it's a park, so it'll remain that way, I would assume. And I guess he can have at it, coming or going as he pleases, But yeah, that's my story. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Some people have said that he carries his. There are times where they see the ghost carrying a head with it. Who knows? A decapitated head carrying with it. Others say he's in search of it. So who knows? But I tell you, the whole experience of being there at night in such a rural area with the thought of a headless spirit being by that actually moves or goes towards you would be quite disturbing to me. I don't know if I could ever last. I don't think I'd last too long there. I think I'd feel enthusiastic and want to go and experiencing it, but I think I'd be out of there pretty quickly if I encountered anything at all. So that's the story, my friend. Thank you, my friends, and thank you as always for joining me. I don't think I missed anybody new that has come in, but I thank you all. If I missed anybody, I really apologize, because I want to say hello to everybody personally if they're here. And if you come in and watch it on replay, hello to you too. Thank you as always for watching. I do appreciate it. But that's the story of the headless Frenchman of Kettle Creek, Pennsylvania. Actually, this is closer to our Buffalo friends. It's not that far from Buffalo. You guys could check it out if you ever get interested. Go to that area. Well, thank you, Emmanuel. I appreciate that. And I just want to plug again, if anyone wants to I really want to do a live show where people come on and share their experiences if they've had one. If you've had a paranormal experience, I would love to hear your firsthand experience. I know some people have said to me that they've had one, so I would love to have it. I put it up on my community page. My email address is there. Just email me. Tell me you'd want to do this, that you have a story to tell, and I want to do it all in one night. Like, I want to schedule it, plan one night where I won't tell a story that night. We'll just hear your stories and we'll react to your story. So if you have any, please, by all means, let me know and you're interested. You don't have to show your face. You could just have an avatar, but I'd really appreciate that. I've never really had one myself, so I can't share any of mine because I don't have any, but I'd be very curious to hear and react to any experiences you folks have had. So I don't know what else is going on with you guys tonight. I hope everyone is doing well. And I think we're going back to winter. We've had warm days. This coming week, it's going to get cold again. The first day of spring is coming, but it's going to be a cold first day of spring. And then who knows? Soon it'll be time for planting the garden, which I'm really looking forward to, as always. Emmanuel, the poltergeist story from England. I can look into it. I don't know about that, but I can look into it. There's a poltergeist story from England. I didn't know that. But I could certainly look into it. I'm always looking for a good story. But yeah, so that's what's happening, my friends. That's our story for this evening. Let me see if I missed anybody in the chat here. Anything? Oh, you're welcome, Paul. Yeah, Gene, absolutely. I hope you'd enjoy it. I think you'd enjoy it. I would certainly enjoy it myself. 0 degrees for Paul. Whoa, wow, cold over there. Yeah, we've been in a warm spell. So, Edenville, England. Okay, Emmanuel, I'll look it up. Actually, I'm going to write it down right now. Edenville, England. Okay. Poltergeist. Always looking for a good new story. Yeah, it's hard. You'd be surprised. It's hard sometimes to find an interesting story on the internet. If you go on the internet and just put in ghost stories or what have you, it's hard to. You get the same things over and over again. So you really have to dig a lot to find an interesting story. So any tips you guys will give me, I appreciate. So that's it, guys. I won't take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you joining me. I have nothing else to share at this point, so I'm not going to just hang around. But I do thank you, as always, for being a part of this, helping me build the guild. Hit the like button if you like what you see. Share it with a friend if you want. That's cool, too. But I do... Enfield. Okay, Enfield. Thank you, Emmanuel. Enfield, England. Will do. All right. All right, guys. Well, as always, I thank you so much for being here. And build the guild, like, and all that's fun stuff. And as always, I say God bless. Love you guys always. And have a wonderful evening and a great weekend as we blow out the candles and say goodbye.